Hi, this is Donna, and today I want to talk to you about Frida Kahlo's clothes because many people know more about Frida Kahlo herself as a persona than they do about the art that she created, although much of her art was pictures of herself, and that helps with that connection. But really, we all know this image of Frida Kahlo wearing certain clothes, certain colors, flowers in her hair, the earrings of hands that she got as a gift from Picasso, etc., etc. So I want to talk a little bit about specifically her background and why she was interested in the type of clothing that she wore, and then show you the inspiration for this month's project specifically. Okay, this is a painting by Frida Kahlo called My Grandparents and I, but it also includes, of course, her parents. And um, she said of herself, I am a mixture. She was a mixture of many different things. And ancestrally, her mother was part Spanish and part indigenous Mexican, and her father was um, from Germany. So her mixture of self-identification came from Europe and Mexico. Obviously, she was really, really connected with the place where she grew up and her mother's ancestry in that place more than with her European on the level of how she dressed. Of course, she also worked with other European artists and went to France, and so she explored all these parts of her life throughout the time that she had as an artist when she was healthy enough to do these things. The place in Mexico and the people that inspired Frida Kahlo the most regarding her clothing was the Zapotecs and Tehuanas, which is the same thing, or Zapotecs is more in the past, but this is a continuous group of people with a continuous culture and language and so forth. And the area that this culture was most prevalent in is in Oaxaca, in the south part of Mexico. Also well known for being where there is a lot of natural dyeing with cochineal. But you can see the clothing worn by the women in this picture. Of course, this is a festive event, and this is not everyday clothing, but you can see that they're all different, but they have a lot of similarities. Lots of color, lots of patterning, and a lot of them have this white ruffled thing around their neck or head, and that evolved over time into different styles, and we're going to look at that more in a few minutes. Recently, in the 21st century, we've learned a lot more about Frida Kahlo's clothing because it was finally opened up to the public. When Frida died, her husband, Diego Rivera, had all of her personal items locked up for 50 years in a room of her house. It's known as the Blue House, or La Casa Azul, and it's the location of the Frida Kahlo Museum in Mexico City now. But her things were locked up in one room of that house for 50 years. And so we knew what we saw from her from photographs and from her art, but the actual clothing that she owned and her jewelry and her personal effects were not able to be seen by people, even though they were in the house of the museum. Diego Rivera's wishes were honored, and those things were not, that room was not opened for 50 years. So after the room was opened in the Blue House at the Frida Kahlo Museum, everything that she had owned has been gone through and looked at and made into exhibits and photos and documents, and you can learn a lot about it. So this is a picture and a book from the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's called Frida Kahlo Making Herself Up, and they did a huge exhibit that was at that museum, and a book with text and all kinds of pictures from the exhibit. It's a wonderful book if you want to look into this further. There are also other books and lots of websites that you can find pictures of Frida's clothing, and not just her clothing, but her jewelry, her personal effects, medical devices, all kinds of things that she owned. The clothing is what, as a knitter, interests me the most in relation to my work, but it's a fascinating look into the life of this iconic artist. Here you can see the headdress called resplendor, which means like a glowing or bloom, which is a traditional headdress of the Tijuana women in Oaxaca that we mentioned before. You can see there's a lot of lace in this, different sheer fabrics, satin ribbon for a little tiny bit of color, and lots of ruffles. What's really interesting about this is how the pleated ruffle frames the face so tightly, and then the thing just flows out and it kind of covers your arms and everything. So it's something that you'd wear for special events. Obviously, it's not very practical for everyday life, but Frida painted herself wearing this type of thing twice. Of course, she didn't wear it regularly either. She's much more well known for having her hair up in braids with different kind of floral, headbands and things. But she was really inspired by these enough to paint two important paintings of herself wearing them. This is the first painting that Frida made of herself wearing the resplendor that we saw in the previous photo. You can see the pink ribbon on it and the lace and sheer fabrics in the same places, but she also had some flowers painted in her hair, and if you can see here on her forehead, she had a picture of Diego Rivera. So this is called the self-portrait as Tijuana, but she also called it Diego in My Thoughts and Thinking of Diego, because I don't know if you know, in her life with him, they were lifelong partners, but they got divorced, they split up, they fought, they got back together. It was a very tumultuous relationship. And so this was a period when they were apart, but he was still in her thoughts, and she wanted to explain that and show it in this picture. And Diego also really loved when she wore this style of clothing, so that is why she had this combination in the painting. Here's a second portrait that Frida painted of herself wearing the resplendor, and you can see this is a different one, very different lace around the face, and this was a close-up, so you don't see the rest of it. This was actually commissioned by her dentist, and she used her paintings and sold them. I mean, she was a commercial artist in some ways, so this was a commission, and she did it for money, but she also did it because she wanted to reflect her mood in her self-portrait and who she was, and you see this in all of her art. But she said, I like this painting because it is the exact expression of my emotions. So it took her a long time to paint, because at this time she was in a lot of physical pain and suffering from injuries that she had earlier when she was very young that were problematic for her throughout her life. So here's my apple blossom hooded cowl that is inspired by the resplendor, but we wouldn't today be able to wear that. I mean, it's obviously a ceremonial or a holiday special event thing that you wear, not for practical daily use, but also it just seems very at odds with our fashion and lifestyle today. So what I did was I made a cowl that's inspired by that, but I made it get bigger. I made a ruffle that goes around the yoke. It still has a tight hood that you can pull up over your head, and I really like this. I wear it in the house in the winter sometimes when I feel chilly, and sometimes to go out. But you can also just push it down around your neck, and it's just a beautiful cowl with a ruffled yoke. So I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about that, and that you'll enjoy making and wearing this cowl as much as I have.